let's look at going ahead and setting up our toolpaths now. Remember to switch to the toolpath toolbar. Up here in the left-hand corner, there's switch to toolpath commands, this menu with the arrow. It's going to open up the other menu. And we're going to start by doing our dados first again. So I'm going to do, it doesn't matter what you select. We're going to use the 1/4 inch end mill again. So now you could do all your 1/4 inch pieces with one bit, and you could do all your bigger dados and rabbets with another bit. Or you could use the same bit. The smaller bit's just going to take longer on these bigger pieces. Let's show you how to set this up with different size bits. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the 1/4 inch. So I'm going to select that one and I'm going to hold shift. And while I hold shift, I'm going to select the other 1/4 inch back cuts. And I'm going to do all of those at once. And you can see that I've got all of them selected. The over travel is all selected on those. Now remember, we're doing a pocket toolpath. This means we're cutting out the middle. We're not cutting out the outside. We're going to remove everything in the middle of these lines. So I'm going to click pocket, and the depth, we're going to do 3/8 of an inch, so 0.375. The end mill, we're going to use a 1/4 inch end mill because if we use bigger, it's not going to fit. And the number of passes is 1. That's fine. It defaults to that. And if we come down here and look, everything else is fine. I'm going to put 0.25 dados. So I know what the cut is and I know what the size of bit is. And then I'm going to hit calculate. Now it's got my old original piece on there. And so what I need to do is reset the reset the preview. And then I can preview all toolpaths and it's going to show where those 1/4 inch grooves are. So let's go back to the 2D one that shows our original plan. Up here in the left-hand corner, you're going to click 2D view. And now let's do our dados. And we're going to do our dados, our 3/4 dados with a bigger bit. I'm going to come over here and close this preview window. And I'm going to select my 3/4 inch dados and rabbets. So I'm going to hold shift while I do this. And I'm going to select each of these dados and rabbets. You'll want to make sure you've got that selected right so you can zoom in and zoom out and make sure you've got the right one. Keep holding shift as you select. You want to make sure you don't have the outside grabbed or anything like that. And now we're going to hit pocket toolpath again up here on our toolbars. And I'm going to hit pocket. And this time we're going to change the bit. This time we're going to use a 3/8 end mill. So I'm going to hit select and we're going to come up here and we're going to find 3/8. 0.375 is our 3/8 end mill. This is going to allow us to cut this a little bit faster. So in 2 swipes rather than 4 swipes or 3 swipes. So I'm going to click the 3/8 end mill and I'm going to hit OK. And it's going to auto calculate as far as the number of passes. We're not going very deep, so 1 pass is good. And if I come down, all of this looks good. You can do ramps. If you remember ramps, this is my bit right here, my cursor. What a ramp does is a ramp takes the bit and moves it in at an angle into the wood. If you don't have a ramp, it's going to drive straight into the wood and then move. A ramp slowly moves at an angle so that it doesn't put so much pressure on the bit. And you can click on ramp. We're not cutting very deep, so we don't have to have a ramp, but you can add it if you would like. It's not going to affect your cuts really much in any way. You're not going to really notice how much time it takes, but it's not a bad thing to have on there. I'm going to change this. So I got to be able to identify my different cutters. So I'm going to put this as 0.375 dados. So I know that it's different. DAD dados. And then I'm going to calculate that. Again, it brings you right to the 3D view. If you want to preview it, you're going to preview all, and it's going to show you the cuts in the wood. Now to get back to our view, you come up here to the left-hand corner and hit 2D view. And then from here, now we're going to do our outside cuts. So because we didn't leave much room between some of these, what we're going to need to do is we're going to have to go back and we're going to use the 1/4 inch end mill again. That's going to give us enough room to cut around all of these pieces. Now, for some reason, as I zoom in here and look, for some reason, these two are connected. If I zoom in here and look, this outside shape is connected to that side. So if I click here, I can grab this node and I can snap it to that side. Now we have the separation there. So I caught that because there was a line connecting the two. So you got to watch some of these details as you're doing this. So back to what we were doing. We're going to use the 1/4 inch end mill because like between here, there's not a big gap. And so we've got to make sure that there's enough room for the cutter to go around. So I'm going to select each of the outside profiles. I'm going to hold shift. Again, I'm not going to grab over here where all these lines are. I'm going to come over to the opposite side and make sure I get a nice clean grab. So I'm not going to grab in here because there's a lot of different lines. I'm going to grab out here and I'm holding shift as I select all of these. And I'm watching to make sure I get the whole outside edge as I select. I'm zooming out and zooming back in so I can see. And shift again, make sure you're holding shift to select all the outside parameters here, all the outside lines, okay? So I've got all my outside lines selected. We're gonna close this preview window over here on the right side. We're gonna hit close. And I'm gonna come up here and I'm gonna click this time Profile Toolpath because we're cutting the outside. We wanna leave the middle, but we wanna cut the outside. So I'm gonna hit Profile. And my start depth is 0, that's fine. My cut depth is 0.75, that's what we want. Our tool that we're using is the 1/4 inch end mill. And the reason for that, again, is so that we have room between some of these narrow cuts. If we left the 3/8 end mill in, then there might not be enough room between each one of the pieces. The thing that you've got to watch here is to make sure that the machine vectors are on outside as we're cutting out the pieces. We talked about this on the last sheet. Inside would mean that it would cut on the inside of the line, so your pieces would all be small. And on the line would mean the bit would stagger the line, and so you would have, if we're using a 1/4 inch end mill, we'd have an 1/8 inch over here and an 1/8 inch on the inside. And again, that's going to make your pieces the wrong size. So we want to make sure we're selected on the outside for this job. And there are times when you'd use inside and on the line, but not for cutting out these pieces that we want to be the exact size. We're going to scroll down and we're going to add tabs to the workpiece. And again, you don't really need to mess with much of the information here, but we're going to edit the tabs right here on this button. And as we come in, I like to manually add these tabs. And so I'm going to start up here on my top pieces. And what I like to do is have my tabs across from each other. So if I put them directly across from each other, then there's going to be some strength right here. If I have them offset like down here from here to here, then there's a tab here, but when it cuts here, there's some weakness and it's not nice, and strength, there's not material attaching. So when I have them across from each other, there's solid material going that whole span, so there's no weak spots. And again, if you put a tab somewhere and you decide you don't want it there, you just click on it again to get it to go away. So I'm going to add a tab here, and down here where these two are almost touching, I'm going to put a tab across from these two, so that way they are linked together so things don't shift around. Now I do want to avoid putting them on the end here because there is a dado or a rabbet cut in here. And when we're clean off these tabs, we're going to use the flush trim router bit, and that bearing would allow us to cut into this dado. So we're going to avoid putting them right here on the ends where our dados are, but I am going to put one on this piece, even though there's nothing on the other side. Over here, I'm going to come in, so I want one on this piece, so I'm going to add one right here, even though there's two real close to each other. That's just going to give strength to that other piece. And I'm going to zoom out, zoom back in. I'm going to put a tab here and there. You can put them over here where you've got a little bit of material as well. Now on a longer piece, maybe you want to put an extra tab in there just for support. The tabs aren't going to hurt anything, We do have to take them off later, but it's not a big deal. Again, if you don't have them in the right location, you can just click on it again and reposition. If it's not snapping to the right spot, then you may have to zoom in to get that right across from each other. So I've got those on there. I'm going to put some on the ends here just to keep everything from shifting around. Put one here. There's no dado or rabbit on the end, so I'm going to go ahead and put some on here. That way the flush trim router can take that off. And I'm going to put some over here. Now, the only negative thing about these tabs are when we're done routering out all of these pieces, we have to come in with a little handsaw and cut these tabs that are left over. If we don't cut the tabs and we just break the pieces apart, we could chip the plywood. So when the sheet is done, you have to go around with a little handsaw and you have to cut all of these tabs to remove them so the pieces come loose. And that would be the only negative side to the tabs that I would see is you could chip your pieces a little bit if you're not careful. So once you've got all your tabs added and you're happy with that, then we're going to go ahead and hit close right down here on the tabs toolpath. And it brings us back to our original menu here. And again, you can add ramps. We described what ramps are. It's going to be a little bit smoother on the bit or a little bit less pressure on the bit and machine. And I'm going to determine what this is. It's 0.25 profile, meaning it's cutting the outside edge, and calculate. All right, so we have some different tool paths here now. Let's preview this now and see what this looks like. So if I preview all tool paths and I take a look up here, here is a problem that we have right here. These pieces were too close together. And so that bit, there's not enough room for that bit to come through here. If we take a look at the 2D view, okay, and we turn on these tool paths, you can see there just was not enough room and that bit does not cut all the way through. So we can give ourselves a little bit more room. I'm going to select, I just want to make sure I got just this piece. I'm going to select a box around there and make sure that that's all purple. And I'm going to move it over just a couple arrow keys. Maybe just one should be good. Now I have to tell it to recalculate the tool paths because I moved things. So I'm going to come up here to tool paths and click recalculate all tool paths. And so when I click that, it's going to reconfigure for my moving. So recalculate, it tells me everything was successfully recalculated. So now I can come up here to the left-hand corner and click 3D view. And I'm going to reset the tool paths or the preview. And now I'm going to preview all tool paths. And now that I moved it, there's enough room there that it's making the cuts. I can see I have the same issue right here. These two are too close together that I'm not getting a cut. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to move these. And so I can move, there's enough room to move all of them, or I could just move these two. And maybe I'll just move all four of these. Make sure I don't have anything extra selected. And I'm going to move all four because I have a little bit of room here at the end. And the closer I zoom in, when I use the arrow keys, the less it moves. So the closer I am in, the less movement I get per arrow key. And again, once we move something, then we have to come up here to tool paths and recalculate all tool paths. Okay, it was successfully done. Okay. Now I want to come back here to my 3D view, and I'm going to click on that tab up here in the left corner, and I'm going to reset my preview, and I'm going to preview all toolpaths. And now you can see we've got that light through there, so we're cutting all the way through. So that looks good. So now that all of that looks good, and if we turn on our toolpaths on this view and all of those have directions around them or arrows, that all looks good. Now we can save these to get these to the router. So I'm going to hit close on my preview over here, and I'm going to click this bottom right-hand corner, save toolpath. So when I click that, you can see I'm getting this error here that the visible toolpaths are different tools. So when that's on, that tells me that I've got some issues because I have different size bits. So rather than changing the bits so much, if I do a 1/4 inch dado and then I go to 3/8 and then I go back to 1/4, it's going to be a lot more work for me. So I'm going to take this 1/4 inch dado and I'm going to move it below. This means that it's going to do the 3/8 bit first, and then we're going to do these two next. That is the order that it's going to cut. So with the first one, that's your first bit. The second one, that's your second cut, and third cut, and so on. So I'm going to uncheck the 3/8 dado because that is a different size. And if I uncheck that 3/8 dado, you see my warning goes away. And it tells me the different paths that are going to be saved. Those are those two checked. We see those up here. And I'm going to save toolpath. Again, I'm going to put this on the desktop somewhere I can find it. And I'm going to call it, I'm going to use the same wording, but I'm going to put it to sheet 2. So sheet 2, and this is the 1/4 inch end mill bit. Okay, so that looks good, and save. Remember, you shouldn't need to mess with the post processor. That stays the same all the time. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to uncheck those two. And now I'm going to check the 3/8 and I'm going to save that. And again, I'm going to use the same wording, but this time I'm going to switch the size of the bit to 375 or 3/8. And then I'm going to hit save. So now my toolpaths are saved. So you can save, make sure you're saving your work often. That's something you always want to do. If something crashes or, you leave and come back later, we want to make sure we're saving the work. You can come up here and file save, or you can go Control S on the machine. Control S will save it. And that way your work is always saved when you have your name on there, and you won't lose your work.